Welcome to episode 3 of the Imperial Tides podcast. I'm your host, the great and powerful 21st Century Holden Caulfield, and I'm joined today by the illustrious, eminent Simone of the Philippines. How are you doing today, Simone?
Good, I'm fine. Doing well.
And that's good to hear. We are recording this episode immediately after episode 2, the previous one, and so we just got finished watching a French Canadian film called Mon Oncle Antoine. Talk to me a little bit about Mon Oncle Antoine, Simone.
I think it doesn't act the way as normal movie did. I think it didn't try to be more elaborate or more creative on things. I think it depicts how life. Uh,
It depicts what? How life is?
it depicts the normal things that happens in the life, the mundane things that happen. For example, normal daily routine and how at some points the typical things that happen in our life are so lonely or it's something.
Oh, okay. Don't worry. I'll talk for you. That's fine. Um, so he's having a bit of technical difficulties. There's a lot of noise over where he is. So I guess I'll bear the brunt of the conversation for this particular episode. Um, so Bon Uncle Antoine. I really don't know a whole hell of a lot about French Canadian society, much less Canadian society, much less French Canadian society. But I think this movie really did give me a little bit of insight into that little, the culture and everything. This is rural Quebec, somewhere around the years of, it's set before the asbestos strike of 1949 in Maurice Duplessis era, the Maurice Duplessis era asbestos region of rural Quebec. Christmas time, 15-year-old boy Benoit, who was coming of age in a mining town. The asbestos strike is regarded by Quebec historians as a seminal event in the years before the Quiet Revolution, which took place between the 1959 to 1970. This film, which was directed by Claude Jutra, is an examination of the social conditions in Quebec's old agrarian, conservative, and cleric-dominated society on the eve of the social and political changes that transformed the province a decade later. As a film on its own, I would say that it's a bit difficult to appreciate without the historical background, the historical, social, and I suppose political background that colors it and colors the lives of the characters depicted within it. And like Simone said, it isn't a conventional film in the sense that it doesn't really have much of a narrative structure to it. It's more just a sequence of events. It's a window into the lives of these people in this small mining town in rural Quebec, and it's interesting as a meditative experience, I suppose. There were moments where I did get drawn in by certain scenes. In particular, I really enjoyed. I For some reason I don't really know why, but I enjoyed the sequence in which he was in which our character Benoit, the main protagonist, was uh, taking communion by himself and going through certain religious ceremonies with the priest, and then on his way out, he opens the door and he finds the priest guzzling down the wine, and this boy is 15. He didn't feel the need to do that himself. He was actually responsible with the communal wine, and so that was I thought that was a nice touch. That was interesting. And later on, when his uncle is driving with him, to the house where they're going to pick up Marcel, who is the boy who dies, same age as Benoit, and looks a lot like him. Um, he doesn't, the uncle offers him a drink and he refuses, and he turns it down, and then but then towards the end, after he's seen the body, after he's dealt with death, after he's had like a proper brush with it. He had one at the beginning, but he didn't seem to take it seriously. Now that the boy looks like him, now that the boy is similar to age in him with him, he identifies with it, and he sees a part of himself in that boy, and it's like looking at a dead version of him. It's like looking at his own corpse, and that seems to wake him up a little bit to the realities of not only life, not only death, but of life itself. And that's when he does feel the need to take a drink. Um, and so that was an interesting little motif. I thought that was consistent throughout the film. It's just his relationship to alcohol, the uncle's relationship to alcohol, which ultimately causes all of the disaster in the end, where the body is recovered by the father, who was forced to work to make money. He was wayfaring for the family, and then he comes back, and he has to drag the body back to his house, and it's the body of his son. His son is dead, and the film ends with the mother glaring at Benoit through the window, and he's failed, he's messed up, and Antoine especially is messed up, but Antoine's life isn't very good. His wife is cheating on him with their clerk, because they run a general store, and the general store really is the center of the village life there in Quebec, rural Quebec, their little mining town. Um, Antoine, he has a lot of regrets. The uncle, the titular uncle, he has a lot of regrets. His wife clearly doesn't love him anymore. There's a scene, actually. There are a lot of interesting visual metaphors interspersed throughout the course of the narrative. One I was particularly cognizant to, I suppose, was the prevalence of religious imagery throughout the film, and I guess that does tie into how significant the cleric is in this society. Yes, religion is a very important part of the mining town, the landscape of the mining town, I'd say. Um, you get two shots on two occasions. You get zoom-ins. You get zoom-ins to churches, and the first was without bells. The second was with bells. Um, I suppose that was there. The director was just trying to again emphasize how important religion is in this small, in small towns like this. It really is kind of this. It's there. It's very much there. It's this dominating force, and I don't really know what else to say about that. Would you say, Simone, that what do you think? Do you have any thoughts, any comments about the religiousness of the film?
I think that 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 really depicts how the town it is, or how it really affects or really show how life in that town really works, or how it affected their daily lives, or how they live everyday life cycles affect the religiousness or the way they live.
Would you say that you live in a small town over there in the Philippines?
I don't think that it's small. It's small, but there's 200,000 people around this town. I think I'm not sure with the number.
Okay. How would you compare your life with the life here? Do you see any similarities, any commonalities?
It's far from my situation right here because people here are are sense of family. I think even though you didn't know him, but random strangers in the road, and then they smile at you, and then you smile back, and then they say hello, and then you say hello, and then it wasn't that depressing at all. It's too normal, but it's not as normal as the things of the movie.
Right, right. And that leads me into my next question, which what do you think what are some of the good things about rural life, in your opinion?
Mm, rule of life. Is it the how life works or how we live or we spend our days?
No, no, rural life. So, like, they're out in rural Quebec, countryside, agrarian society, sort of. What are the upsides to that? What are the good aspects of a rural life?
The good aspects of rural life. I think that people will appreciate what they have. I think Because in the series, there are a lot of people in the cycle that the never-ending.
Uh, okay. Simone appears to be having technical difficulties. Let me just I'll vamp for him while he figures that out. Personally, I think the aspects of rural life that I find positive would include a very strong sense of community. We don't really know what happened to Benoit's parents, but he, for whatever reason, he's working. He appears to be living at at the general store, the town general store, which is the center of the community in the mining village. It belongs to his aunt, Cecile, Madame Cecile, and his uncle Antoine, who's much older. I mean, they're both pretty old, but he's a lot. He seems to be somewhat significantly older than Cecile. And Antoine is also the town undertaker. I'm taking this all off Wikipedia just to try to structure my thoughts a little better. This is set, it is set around Christmas time, Christmas Eve and then Christmas Day. Um, and there are references to Christmas. There's the I don't really, I don't really know who that guy was. There was one point, there was one scene where the guy was there was an older man distributing presents to the village folk, the town folk, and they didn't seem to like him, and so Antoine and a friend threw snowballs at the horse, and it scared the horse and drove the guy away, and everyone seemed to they didn't cheer necessarily, but they were happy about it, and he seemed to win. Benoit seemed to win Carmen's approval, and Carmen is the girl that lives there as well. She has a bad dad who only wants her the money that she gets from working there, kind of a deadbeat dad. And she and Benoit live with the aunt and uncle, and they work at the store. I think they live there. They work there anyway, but yeah, this is a movie that doesn't really have a conventional narrative structure, so it's a bit difficult to talk about it. But I accept the challenge with open arms. I think there are a lot of interesting topics that this film does touch upon by merely showing it. It's just by demonstrating it, by just presenting it to you. There isn't a lot of directorial interference in an interesting way, because there isn't really a moral, there isn't really a message, there isn't really a point. I would say there is a through line. I don't really know quite what it is. I haven't really articulated it quite yet, but there is a rough, vague, general through line here. I just don't know what it is yet. Do you have any idea, uh, Simone, what the message or the point of this film is at all?
I think it's about they're trying. I don't know if it's exactly the message of the movie at all. I think they're trying to depict what rural life is all about. I mean, through the eyes of the boy and through the eyes of a uh, of the people around her. For example, the eye of Carmen, the Carmen of age, and then her youth about getting into getting in love with Benoit, and then Benoit trying to understand what surroundings about the people around him, why these people are drinking, why they're like this, or for example, he's been shocked when he find out that the general store uh, worker or seller, I don't know what's the term for
The
that,
clerk, the clerk,
is having an
clerk,
the clerk having an
Fernand,
affair with
Fernand, yeah,
her,
Fernand the clerk.
with his aunt, and I
Right,
don't
yeah.
know. That's really shocked him.
Yeah, yeah, he gets his first taste of kind of the affairs of adults, I suppose. Well, it's literally an affair, but yeah, kind of on Christmas Day, one Christmas, all in one Christmas, he gets a little taste of death, a little taste of human betrayal, a little taste of the distance between appearances and reality. Sometimes, in the sense that well, before that, he for all intents and purposes, he thought that his aunt and uncle had a good, healthy relationship. It was that distance, you know, which is, I guess, embodied in that little scene where Antoine pours himself a drink, and Cecile asks if he's going to pour her one, and he forgets to pour her one, and so then he does, and they do a little toast real quick, and it's awkward, and they try to have a little bit of conversation, a little bit of spousal banter, and it's not there, it's uncomfortable, it's awkward, it's not the natural way of doing things, and there's this distance there, and it's not the kind of distance that a kid would pick up on, even a kid of 15, and so it really did, yeah, you could tell it really did shock him to find the clerk sleeping with his aunt, and yeah, it's kind of it's kind of rough, yeah, that scene kind of made me mad, it kind of made me angry, how giggly they were about it, how how unrepentant either of them seemed to be. They didn't seem very guilty. Only when Benoit showed up at the door did the aunt really seem to feel bad about what she did, and even then, it was only because she got caught, So I just thought that was interesting, and it made me a little mad, and it kind of made me question, I guess the strength of familial relations. I know that their relationship wasn't great, Antoine, he mentioned, or yeah, Antoine mentioned how he wanted to have a hotel in the United States that his aunt wouldn't let him, that Cecile didn't approve of. Um, it's a bit of a shame, he's unsatisfied, he's unfulfilled, his life isn't really going anywhere. He doesn't like the countryside. He breaks down, and it scares Benoit, and Benoit has a bit of a poor reaction to it. Instead of kind of comforting him what he should have, he just tells him he's an old drunk. But then again, he is an old drunk, and he moments before that, the uncle told Benoit, basically just told him that he was a piece of shit, and that he was annoying. And so I understand, but it's a shame that they couldn't have come together in the end. But maybe that's the Hollywood ending. Maybe that's the fairy tale ending, and that's just not how life is, I suppose. The French have a very pessimistic view when it comes to life. I know that these are French Canadians, and I know that the French Canadians don't like to be associated with the actual French. They see them much as, I guess most Americans see the British, I suppose. But you know, they're interesting. They're interesting. They're very I would say they're very misanthropic, though, and especially when it comes to the rest of the world. I look at this movie a bit. I have a bit of a weird relationship with well, I don't know. I guess I don't really personally. I mean, this is the first French Canadian film I've ever seen. But I don't know. I kind of have a tough time looking at it objectively, I suppose, because from what I can tell, the Canadians think they're a lot better than us, low life Americans, and especially the French Canadians. The French Canadians think they're better than the regular Canadians, and then the regular Canadians think they're better than us. So I can only imagine that the French Canadians, are extremely snooty when it comes to us, I don't even know what you would call us, Philistines here in the U.S. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I would, so far, I got to say, I'd have to give this film a 6 or a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. Probably a 6.5, honestly. A 6.5 or maybe a 6.75. It didn't really engage me. It was, for the most part, it was boring. And like I said, I like my movies to have a point. When I judge movies, I judge them based on how much I get out of them, how much insight I gain, what I learn, what changes, what I feel, what I experience secondhand. And this movie is one of those movies that is more experiential. It shows, it just shows, it just shows, it just depicts. Um, the director doesn't really have a big point to make. He doesn't want to. He doesn't have a moral. Really, it's just these are people's lives. This is how it was. Let's put you in this life for a bit, this mode of life for a little while, and then that's it. Just for an hour and 40 minutes or so, you get to know what it was like to be, uh, you know, in these mining towns at the turn of the century, or well, maybe not at the turn of the century, but in mid-century, the middle of the previous century, let's just say 19, somewhere around the 1940s, 1950s. It was interesting. I don't really know exactly what I learned from it. I don't know exactly what I got out of being put in that position. What do you think you got out of being put in this particular place, Simone? Simone. Hello. Sorry, folks. I think we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Uh, Give me 1 second. We'll keep this all in. Yeah, I don't know. Simone, how did you feel about what do you think you got out of being put in the perspective of these French Canadian mining village or people? I guess what do you think you gained from watching this movie?
I think it gives me. It's not more on the moral of the story. It's more on experiential thing. It's like you said that it gives you an exact experience of the people that live there, Canadian and Canadian French community. What I like is that there's one this scene. I don't know. It doesn't sound like me. The scenes when Benoit has a sexual awakening about when he picked about this woman dressing up in the store, and then I think it's also a good part. I mean, I don't know. I didn't see the world as he did, so it gives me a view on how things works that I don't understand before. So I like that scene.
Yeah, that is it's an interesting scene. It's a formative scene, very much so. Are you talking about the scene where he and his friend are watching her through the door, or are you talking about the scene at the end where he has a dream about her, um, in the casket or whatever?
Oh, I think both of the scenes. I like those scenes.
Both of them,
'Cause
and
I'm not
what about them do you like exactly?
things that I don't like. I think there are some parts that are that you can say that it's boring because it's just
No.
a
No.
normal.
Hey. No, I meant what about those two scenes that you were talking about? Did you like? What did you get out of them? Do you think, and what was enjoyable about them? What kind of insight did they bring to you? I suppose.
Um, Before I thought that it's somehow simple to view by that airport, and I don't know. I just realized that we're human beings, and it's just in our biology or our genes that how we been like that. So I think it's a good depiction of that thing.
I thought it was interesting. I liked that first scene where he and his friend were watching the woman, the notary's wife. I think her name was Alexandrine. Change into the girdle or whatever. Girdle's not a very sexy word, by the way. But I they got quite a show, by the way. They got everything. They got to see all of it. I was surprised that no one saw them, no one caught them, until Carmen tripped over the barrel of nails. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. That one was fine because I liked that one because it was true to life. It was it's something that probably happens a lot. Never happened to me, unfortunately. I've never been able to, But anyway, but the second scene I kind of thought towards the end where it was the fantasy where he was taking the crucifix out of from her hands, like much like it echoed the beginning where the man at the dead man at the beginning, they were having a hard time getting the crucifix out of his hands. That also ties into the religious symbolism of the film. I kind of saw that as that man not really wanting to let go of the faith. I suppose was a clever. I thought I saw it as a clever little visual metaphor. That's how I interpreted it anyway. But the ending, he has no problem pulling the crucifix off, and I suppose that was perhaps a visual for letting go of the faith. I suppose letting go of the constraints of the religiously dominated society, I suppose, and kind of having a little fun, maybe letting his hair down, I suppose, with the woman. And she's dead, and she's in the casket, but she gets up and she starts jumping up and down. And she's got her bare breasts out, and you know what? I saw that as sort of maybe youth prevailing, adolescence prevailing. The kid just saw another kid who's the same age as him die, but Benoit's still alive. the other kid, Marcel, may be dead, but Benoit is still very much well and alive. He's in the prime of his life, or he's about to be in the prime of his life. I suppose he's still got until then anyway. He's got Carmen. He's got his aunt and uncle, even though their relationship isn't very good. He's got the general store, and that seems to be a nice place of community. It's warm. It's not all that bad. And above all, really, he's not dead. He's not dead, and he's growing up. He's at the beginning of life, and he's got a long way to go, like I said. But I saw that as a sort of a somewhat absurdist declaration of youth and the vitality of youth and a rejection of death and just him saying, I'm not going to die yet. I got a long way to go. I'm not going to die. I'm going to enjoy what life has to offer, and that is what life has to offer is embodied by the beautiful woman and her and her luscious breasts or whatever, which really weren't that big, but that's besides the point, I suppose. Uh, and it reminds me of a, something of a concern, I guess, that centers. It doesn't center the film, but that maybe that's what makes it more significant. Why, Simone? Answer me this: why do you think the French, or well, I suppose in this case the French Canadians, why do you think they're so obsessed with sex? Why is that?
I don't know. I think it's more person. I thought it's the American that's so obsessed with sex. But I never thought that it was the more on French because I think they see sex as form of art because they're so philosophical human. There are which we can say that there are the most philosophical human beings, or um what do you call this? They're more on enjoyment of life, wine, banquet, and sex, and I don't know. I think they are the ones that who wants to view life or wants to enjoy life the way that they see it because uh, there's only one one chance that we are living. I think that's it.
Okay, so you think it's a YOLO kind of situation? You only live once, so let's just enjoy everything life has to offer. Just like with Benoit, where he's fantasizing about the woman and he's rejecting death in the form of her and her, and her physical beauty, I suppose. But they are. I would agree with you. They are one of the most philosophical peoples out there. But I'm wondering, don't you think it's a little depressing though? Don't you think it's a little depressing how kind of sex crazed they are? I think there are some aspects to it that are kind of bad. I would say, and maybe this is just me being a prudish American or whatever. But and if that's the case, well then go fuck yourself kindly. But I don't really. There are certain parts of it that I kind of find really unpleasant, like when Ferdinand, the clerk, he slaps Carmen's ass in that one scene. Do you remember that? He just like straight up smacked her in the ass, and she's like an underage girl, and she's not even related to him.
Yeah. I remember that part. I think that's absurd.
Well, what did you think of it? Do you think did it bother you, or did you think it was just just a friendly gesture because they're close? How did you see it? It kind of bugged me a little bit, but maybe that's just me.
I don't know. It also bugs me because it's unusual to see a culture like that. I think it's a bit more absurd. I think when girls to girls do that, I think it's okay. But when a older man do it, I think it's quite somehow a form of sexual harassment. You can say it. Especially here, people are quite conservative.
Yeah, it bugs me a little bit because it's like I feel bad for the girl. I feel bad for Carmen. She kind of gets the worst of it. Even though, well, I guess Marcel, who dies, I guess he gets the worst of it, or maybe his family gets the worst of it. Maybe the dad who has to work all these weird jobs and travel across the region. Maybe he gets the worst of it. But I would say personally, for me, I think Carmen gets the worst of it. Oh, and also Antoine, I suppose, whose wife is cheating on him, and he doesn't go to the U.S. to open a hotel and everything. I suppose he gets it pretty bad. Um, and Benoit, who sees death. Out of all of them, I would say probably Carmen gets the worst of the deal, I suppose, because her dad's a deadbeat. He takes all her money, all the money that she makes at the general store. He doesn't even provide for her. Um, and yeah, and then she gets her she's just sitting there getting her ass slapped by people. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, but it's there's something about boundaries, you know. There's something about acting a certain way, social decorum, you know. There are certain things that you shouldn't do, especially with kids and with minors, you know. It's just they got let them have that part of their life, you know. Because a big part of this film, actually, a big theme in it, I suppose, because it does have themes, even though it doesn't really have a moral. It does have themes, and one of those themes is death, and I suppose the loss of innocence through exposure to death. Benoit sees death before he was responsible with his alcohol. You know, he only took what he had to of the communal wine, and then he turned down Antoine's offer. You know, when he did offer him a drink, he turned it down. But then after he sees the body, which looks a lot like him, he is driven to drink just a little bit. You know, but that's enough to kind of energize him to lose the body, because then he kind of goes a little out of control. He starts whipping the horses a little too fast, and that's how the body gets dislodged from the sled, and that's what causes the whole scandal. You know, and the film ends with you assuming, with the assumption that that Antoine's reputation in the village is marred now. It's going to be ruined somewhat by the fact that he just straight up left a 15-year-old boy's body in the middle of the snow, just in the middle of nowhere, you know, and Benoit is attached to that. That whole general story is attached to that. So I don't know how damaging that event's going to be. I don't know how hard they're going to have it from then on out. But what I do know is that his life has been changed forever. You know, he has left innocence, and it is very it's philosophical, and the philosophical view is fine, you know, but the way I don't know, the French and the French Canadians, they kind of depress me. Don't you feel like they kind of depress you sometimes, Simone, with their views? Because I think they're a little too pessimistic at times. You know, I think they're, but not so much pessimistic as just, you know, they get to the point where they are, like you said, they are one of the most philosophical peoples out there. But I think they get to the point where they're so philosophical that they just don't care about anything. They get a little too detached. I mean, what do you think about that?
I agree with you that the central move of the film, it's so depressing, to be honest. I never see a scene that makes me a little bit smile or lifts up my spirit. So I think it's really depressing how they view things or how they see. I feel really bad for Carmen. I think I agree with you. Is it okay if I agree with you that she's the one? She's the most. She has the baddest situation, the worst situation of them all, because I don't know. She don't have a family anymore. But the sense of family. I think she belong. I think um the owner of the store, Madame. I don't know. No, I forgot her name.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Has to adapt her,
Madame
but
de Cecile.
oh, Madame Cecile. So knowing that the situation have turned up because of that, because they lost that casket and then the, the body, so everything will be Carmen will be the one vulnerable with all of this. I think she's the one. She don't have anywhere to go, and the things happen. I don't know. I really feel for. I feel bad about her. I think the views on French people. I think they want something that pleasures them. For example, the wine and then sex, and then that they view it to. They look at things that, as you say, it's more philosophical. That it lost its meaning. It lost its sense of appreciation about things. The value of each thing. They know that it's they understand thing or they look at things that it's just normal. So I don't know. It doesn't affect me anymore, or I don't need the. So it's just a passing moment. So it's not an issue if I don't smile or whatever. So just what I it's depressing. How French people do things.
Well, I think well, these are obviously all, by the way, for the just a little disclaimer for the audience. These are broad, sweeping statements, and when we refer to French people, we're referring to the overall culture. And again, I do understand that the French Canadians are distinct from the French. It's like, it would be like me saying, I don't know, the South Africans are all like people living in well, the Dutch, I guess. They are their origins are Dutch, but they're not necessarily Dutch. It's the same thing here. But that being said, I think if there is any view that this movie takes, if there is any particular I guess perspective that it has, it is one of just sort of, I don't know, almost bitter, maybe not even bitter resignation, but just resignation. I think that's a big part of it. Resignation. The priest, he drinks to deal with his problems. So does Antoine. Benoit seems like he's having hints of it, but there's nothing too ambiguous. There's nothing. It's a bit ambiguous. There's nothing confirmed. We don't know if he'll end up becoming a raging alcoholic or if he'll just, you know, be responsible as he was before. There is no. The film doesn't try to establish a connection, correlation between drinking and death. It hints at it, but I don't think it claims to set it in stone that, yeah, the more death you see, the more harsh your life is, the more you're going to drink. And then when you say that, I mean, I guess it's common sense, but the film doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't. Again, it's relatively. It's generally, and I think really for the most part, like 99% of the time, it is just. It's impassioned. It's passion or impassioned, passionless. It just doesn't really have. It's detached, but it's not detached in an existential sense, or maybe it is. I'm not sure. Simone, what do you think the significance of Marcel? Him looking a lot like and being the same age as Benoit. What do you think the significance was to that? Do you think it was like a way to? You think it was like for Benoit, it was like looking into a weird sort of mirror when he took the body away. What do you think the symbolism behind that was? What do you think there was to that scene when he was carrying the body out and the boy Marcel looks like him? Why do you think they did that? Why do you think he made them so similar? The director. Why were they so similar?
I agree. It's one of the best part of the movie. They did that. So what I think about this, that Marcel, okay, because it's coming of age. So for it's a to use his name, Benoit is in his coming of age um year or part of his life. So I think about Marcel. So Marcel is dead. I think it's somehow a test for Benoit on how he will react on things. Supposedly, he will value his life or his, that, or he might be peer dead or he saw a dead body, but it doesn't. It goes the other way. But he didn't look at things like that. It more on appreciate things on the biases that he wants to explore. So I think they challenging Benoit on how he will react on things.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree on that. I would agree. Um, I've pulled up here another Wikipedia article that is related to the Wikipedia article for Mon Oncle Antoine. The Roman du Terror, I probably did not pronounce that correctly, but it essentially translates to rural novel. And the rural novel apparently was a literary genre that was strongly present in French Quebec literature from the years of 1846 to 1945, and it seems to relate a lot to this film, this movie. I think this is a filmic version, the cinematic equivalent of a roman du terroir. I cannot pronounce French. I apologize for that. Rural novel, and well, let's take a look here. Let's see a little more. So the rural novel, just for a little context, it had as its goal the celebration of rural life during a period of rapid industrialization. The clergy and the state encouraged this type of literature. In fact, the moral conservatism of the roman due to the rural novel contrasts starkly with the trends in the literature of France at the time. The Quebecese establishment were hoping that support for this type of novel would strengthen Quebecese morality and perhaps halt an exodus of French Quebecese from rural farming areas to Montreal and the textile factories of New England. The moral mission of the rural novel was set out by someone named Abby Casgrain, a member of the École Patriotique. The novels emphasized four prominent values: one, the rural homestead or agriculture; two, the family; three, the language; and four, religion. The novels idealized a bond with the homestead and farm life. The healthier natural life of the farm was contrasted with the decadence of the city. Above all, this type of world revolved around continuity, traditions, and the passing down of values. Let's see, and then they list some examples and whatnot. The rural novel more or less disappeared during the 1940s when novels about urban life became widely read. Someone named Germaine Gouvernement is generally considered to be the last influential writer of rural novels during this period of transition. I don't know, Simone. What do you think about those four ideals: agriculture, family, language, and religion? Is your culture is your part of the world similar to that? Do they fall in line? Are there any commonalities there?
I think Filipinos are Filipinos. I mean, the way they live, they're Filipinos. But I think Filipinos are romanticizing other cultures. For example, the Korean wave, the American culture, the pop culture, and the K-pops. So I think that Filipinos, I think they're they're making their own culture out of this culture. That's how how Filipinos become more Filipinos. I guess.
Huh. Interesting. That's a good way of putting it. I'd say. I can't really comment on that, unfortunately, because I am not Filipino myself and not overly familiar with Filipino culture. So I will take your word for that. Simone, you are for this podcast, for the sake of this podcast, you are the arbiter of Filipino culture. But I would like to add, for myself, I suppose, it does this film, and I guess this issue of rural living versus more, I guess, more cosmopolitan, more urban living. What, answer me this, Simone. Why do you think it is that a lot of farmer, rural people, why do they have this certain pride about them? Why are they so bitter and resentful? Why, or at least why do they seem so bitter and resentful and kind of how should I say this, groupish, cliquish? Why tribalist? I guess why are they so much like that with regard to people who live in more urban areas and stuff? What is this resentment? Why do you think that is?
I think because they ano, usually these people are come from the same kin, or I think there's some idea, or or their ninuno, or their forefathers, or their great great relatives. They've been stuck there in that place, so I think their sense of being family or keeping their culture or making it survive. Then sometimes it feels like that they're being excluded from the community itself because some cultures are, especially on farmers, when it comes to the French, or I don't know how it works in Canadian, but in the United Kingdom, it's the issue of class, especially in Europe. So I think that they're that's the reason why they're living by their arm. I think they're they're being they're secluding themselves inside this own culture that they're living. Is what I think.
So it's a combination of perhaps, well, with regard to classism, the higher classes treating them poorly, and so then that breeds resentment. But then also the fact that because they are secluded and because they are living sort of within their own society, I guess that family link and that lineage and that the connection to the area itself, their farm in their part of the world and their little patch of land that they own, maybe not so little, but their patch of land that they own, that is their own, that is theirs, that is what they have, that is everything, that's their livelihood, that's how they eat, that's how they pay for themselves, that's how they provide for their children, their wives, what have you. um, you would say that that's the reason why they get a bit resentful, a bit territorial. I don't want to sound like I'm describing them as beneath or whatever. My actually my grandfather, he was from Thailand. He was born into a farming family, and he in the early 20th century he emigrated to the United States, and he worked for the government. He taught soldiers Thai, and that was around the time of Vietnam, when the U.S. was a bit concerned about, I guess, outside influence, especially in that area, Asian. So they taught them Thai. He taught them Thai. He worked for the government. He was a teacher. He went to the University of Indiana University Bloomington. Um, he did a lot of great things. Actually, he was very accomplished, and he's the reason why I'm here, and so I have a lot of respect for him. But when I've asked him about farming and stuff, he has a sort of he has a lot of affection for it. There's the fondness in his heart for it still, even though he's done all of these things, even though he's, I guess, cosmopolitanized, supposedly urbanized himself by moving to, well, he lives in LA now. Um, from Thailand, from rural Thailand, a little patch of farmland, uh, to that, to go from the A to B. I suppose it's a huge change. But despite all of that, through all of that, he still today I've talked to him about it plenty of times, and he has this dream. One of his dreams before he dies, if he can do it, part of him wants to move back to Thailand. He's a real estate broker in LA now, but he would like to, at like, I think he's 78. I really wish I knew how old he was, but it's just, it's this matter of, distance and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, he still works, but he still has this dream. He still has this dream of going back to Thailand, purchasing some cheap farmland, and living off of it until he goes, and giving it to somebody else when, giving it to a cousin or something, to take care of after. But that's what he wants to do, and he has all these really intricate plans as well. Like, he wants a house that has a perfect view of the sun, so that he wakes up every morning to the sun in his face, and it's nice and warm on it, and it's just and he gets to feed himself. It's an organic food, it's natural, no pesticides, nothing to worry about. He will control everything. He's his own boss. There is this sort of this sense of liberation that comes with agricultural living, with rural living. It's not necessarily true of everybody, because there are downsides as well when you're dealing with farm as agriculture as your main source of income, as your livelihood. There's a lot there's a lot of stakes, and so if it goes bad, it goes bad. If there's a bad season, you're kind of screwed. You're fucked, and you got to work just like the father of Marcel did in the film. He had to go all around the region. He was away from his family. There was no stable work. He was just doing odd jobs on all these different places. And the pay wasn't good in certain with certain jobs, and it's just there's no stability. And everything can kind of get messed up right away, and it ties back. I think I just realized this, but I think the film, in a way, it does connect the sort of the what would you call, I guess, the detached, uh not harshness, but the indifference of the universe with regard to agriculture, but also to life. You know, in the sense that you can have, one bad season can ruin a farming family's livelihood, and also, you can be a relatively healthy 15-year-old boy and die, and that's it, and you're dead, and the universe goes on, life goes on. Nothing really changes. It's indifferent. What do you have anything to comment on this, Simone? How do you feel about this indifference?
I think it's sad. I think it's sad, but it's happening in the reality today. It's still happening. But they, especially the here in the Philippines, there are a lot of things that are happening when it comes to farming, that they want to make things industrialized. I think they're turning the rice plantation, rice fields, or farming lands into subdivisions. I don't know what's happening, and even the Department of Agriculture is not doing anything. So I don't know. I think it would be they're oppressing the farmers. I think they have the materials to make things better, or the government to do, because it's their job. But and then they're letting things to happen. They're not doing anything at all. So I think that's, I don't know, that's one of the bad point. about them. That just like you say that there's no one one bad season and everything will be ruined. It's like when it happened to that boy and then his family, that one bad season ruined everything. So I think when their lives end, that's it. Not just not similar to far from the people from the higher class, for example, that even though they're dead, they're still leaves a significance in the community, or people care about them or so. And that's what I see it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so maybe perhaps the fickleness of life, just how unpredictable it can be, how tenuous, I suppose. Um, yeah, it's interesting. You know, it is. I wouldn't say it's necessarily existential, because I have this, for some reason, I have this impulse to connect this to Albert Camus' The Stranger, maybe only just and really for only the only really for the only reason that they're both this and that are both somewhat French language things, even though this is, of course, Mon Oncle Antoine is French Canadian. Um, do you see a connection between this film and The Stranger, Simone?
Yeah, I think so. Because the farmers, the village, the people in the village already accepted their fate that they need to enjoy life or something, some sort of that. I think they already accepted that their life will be miserable, and same with Albert Camus, the stranger, because the main Marcel accepted his fate that he's going to die, and then he didn't regret anything or feel guilt for his actions because he already accepted his fate.
Because
So
he knows
that's
that
it.
he's going to die anyway, so it doesn't matter if he gets punished or not.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I could see that, but there are also, you cannot deny that in Mon Uncle Antoine there are a lot of moments of joy as well, aren't there? When they were opening, for example, the general store, they were dropping the curtains and showing off that nativity scene, and everyone was happy, everyone was cheering, it was a big deal. Wasn't that not a moment of happiness? Isn't there joy in this small town life as well? Aren't there moments of warmth and communal, just togetherness, unity? Uh, isn't that present as well? It has to be there, is it not?
I think it's present. I think that balance the thing. I think it's not so it doesn't focus on only on the depressing part of life or the reality of life. I think it's also part of the reality that there's still joy in them. For example, that simple nativity scene or the kids playing on the side of the road. So I think there's still joy around them.
Is your family a farming family? Do they have agrarian roots, Simone?
Oh, both sides of my family have farmlands, I think, but it's not that a big deal about. It's not that big. It's just a small part of love that they get from their past forefathers or grandmothers. So they're still doing the farm works, but just like I said, the Philippines is not that more inclined on the agricultural side. They're more on trying to get things industrialized, but so people are not finding their hopes on the agricultural side because, for example, the rice crops are it's been so poorly low, and then the governments want to depend on import importing rice. So that's it.
Ah, I see. Have you ever been to the farms yourself? Have you ever visited the farmland that your family owns?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Before we lived there in the farm. I was a kid, so I think it's just in the backyard. You just walk around, and then that's a field. Just play around and goof around during the summers because it's dry, and then spend all your day around there.
Do you feel like you have a strong personal connection to that farmland because it was in your family for a long time and you've been there before and you spent a lot of your childhood there?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think it holds most the memorable parts of my life. I think uh, my development as a child. As it wasn't, I wasn't be the one talking to you right now if I didn't have those experiences.
Right, right, yeah, exactly. Um, hmm. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that the world is becoming more industrialized and that places like ways of modes of life, places and modes of life like the ones depicted in Mon Oncle Antoine are increasingly going away, thinning out? Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that the world's becoming more industrialized and that places like this are disappearing?
I think it's a bad thing because it's the sense of family in the farmland areas. There's a uh, sense of community around there, and then when it things gets industrialized, and it is just they're losing the value of things. I think they didn't give much more important on things because living in an agricultural area is much more simpler. It's the simplest form of life that you can live here. So I think every bite that you get or each food that you take, it's important to you. I think because you work really hard for it, and then when things get industrialized, I think people are get are focused on their works and not appreciating things that they're doing. But it's different here in the Philippines. Filipinos are appreciate things that are have.
But what about like we were saying, what about the fickleness of life? Industrialization, it brings more opportunities, it brings more stability. If you have a bad season, you can take up another job. You can work at McDonald's or something for a bit. You can work part-time retail. You know, how can it be a bad thing when it's better? When you have more opportunities and you have more margin for error, how can it be a bad thing that these very flawed, very perhaps antiquated settings are disappearing? Why is it a bad thing at all? If industry brings with it progress, how can it be a bad thing?
I think I'm connecting things here in my situation in the Philippines. I think when things get in more industrialized and the farmlands are gone, and then the cost of living here will be much more greater than usual. I think it will be more expensive to provide life here. So I don't. Uh, yes, there are tons of jobs that they will make, but losing things are more expensive. I think so. That's what I don't like about industrialization.
But shouldn't the jobs balance out the expense? Does it or does it not? By the way, does it not balance out over there?
I think it doesn't balance because everyone doesn't have the same opportunity that they had because still there are some that uneducated or education system here are free, but there are still some that clings to their um their farmlands. I think they're trying to revive their things that they get from their parents. So not everyone has the great opportunity about this industrialization.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a kind of a throwaway line in this. When Marcel's father is leaving to work, he tells Marcel that he will send him to school next year, and I thought that was interesting because it highlighted how education is not the norm in a place like that, in a place like that mining village in which the film is set. Uh, I think education is very important, and I think it's a shame that they didn't get that. So personally, for me, I would have to say that for all the warmth and all the coziness and whatnot that kind of that those environments bring, I think overall my final verdict on this issue of industrialization, I think industrialization is a good thing. But I think like anything else in life, like literally anything else in life, it has to be done a certain way. Too much of it would be bad. Too little of it would be bad as well. I think there should always be a place for natural farming, kind of this more traditional kind of farming. I think people should still be allowed to do it. I don't think industry should gobble up square inch of the globe, you know. But at the same time, I think if they're going to, I think they should modernize farming as well, in the sense that if you're going to have these agrarian communities and these small mining towns, if they exist at all anymore, have better schools, have school systems, have better infrastructure, have more opportunities, have resources that will allow people that people can fall back onto in case there are those bad harvests. I think it should be updated. I think the mistakes of the past should be accounted for in that sense, and but I still think it should stay around. But in general, yes, I would say industry is a good thing. It just needs to be handled the right way. You know, I think anything can go bad if you do it wrong. I think that's common sense. Uh, what do you think, Simone? What is your final verdict on that?
Yeah, I agree with you that globalization is not that bad. I think there's still it creates more opportunity. I think the only thing that we need is just in moderation, make things make certain things in balance a bit. Um, give people education that they need to understand things. So make everything in balance. For example, the balance in agriculture, it could be more industrialized or it could be more in the natural, but it's just if they know what to do or what's the best thing that they can resort to if there's some troubles that had happened or have will happen. So there are still options. It wasn't a dead end or a burden throughout the genealogy of the family or in the future generations.
Right, right. The world is always changing. The world as it is today is not is barely in a lot of ways it's nothing like it was back just 10, 20 years ago, you know, because the internet has advanced to a point where it is like it's a big deal, you know. The forms of communication have changed, the forms of transportation have changed, jobs have changed, you know. Everything is getting much more, we're becoming much more technologically dependent because the technology is getting better, you know. I mean, our lives today in 2021, because now we are, after all, 4 days into 2021, it's nothing like it was in like the 50s, you know, or you know, in the 1700s. Like it's nothing like that at all. And you know, it's just change is inevitable. I think change is inevitable. We have to learn how to live with it. We have to learn how to do it, to execute it, you know. And we got to ask ourselves, you know, are we really doing things the best way possible? Are we really accommodating for this change as best we can? um I don't think it's good to lust for a simpler times. I think it's good not to forget about the positive aspects of simpler times, but at the same time, I don't think we should fear the future. I think we should be cautious, you know, just as we're cautious about everything, but not necessarily apprehensive, but just we should look at everything, I suppose, logically, you know, impassionately, but with a moral eye, and whatever that means to you, you know, embrace it, I suppose. I don't really know where I was going with that, but the vagueness of that answer should indicate to you that we are coming up to our hour, well, over our hour mark, and that is how long these podcast episodes are. I overall, from at the end of this, coming out the tail end of this discussion, I'd have to say I do have a newfound appreciation for this film. I think it does. It did make for an interesting talk, and so for that alone, I will give it a solid 7 out of 10. How does it fare with you, Simone? What would you give it?
I think earlier I think I'll give it a 6.5, but now I'll give it a 7.
So we agree on this.
Yes, really agree.
Oh well, you know, we'll find something to fight over someday. I'm still holding out hope for that, but I guess just to kind of close, let's do something a little interesting. What best and worst thing about this movie for you, Simone? Best and worst thing.
I think the best thing about this movie is that they did well on depicting or showing how this Canadian French family's life were or how it is worked. And the worst thing is that I don't I'm disappointed about Benoit because I thought that he must be the has the greater development throughout the film, and then but it ends up that he didn't view things that it should be somehow common sense to come. That's what I think.
But don't you think it's true to life that he never really gets it, and that there's no deep moment? Because I mean, a kid like him, again, he probably isn't very educated. No offense, you know, he probably isn't very educated because education is not common in a place like that. He probably hasn't read these great books of literature, so he has no frame of reference for, I guess, the deeper philosophical issues in life. All he has is Marcel's death and Antoine's drinking and whatnot, you know, and his you know aunt's affair. You know, that's all he has, and so I you know, it's not a constructed. It is a constructed. This film is a construction, but at the same time, it's not. It doesn't. It tries to not be. You know, it tries to present itself as not. It tries to present itself as life. You know, moving life, slice of life, moving images, whatever. Um, yeah, but I would agree with you on that. You know, when you watch a movie, you do expect certain things. It's just the way it is. You know, um, I yeah, I would say that I there were a lot of scenes in this that were kind of boring, you know, kind of not completely engaging. Life's boring, you know. I like a little bit of escapism in my movies, just a little bit, you know, and I think that's normal, just a pinch, you know, at least. I like my movies to be entertaining. This one, there were times where it wasn't, but you know, maybe that's a good thing. Karl Ove Knausgaard, one of my favorite writers, he's a Norwegian. He wrote the My Struggle book series and a lot of other things as well. The Seasons Quartet. So much longing in such little space. And then there's a new book of essays that I'm going to get this Wednesday, I believe. Um, Point being that Karl Ove Knausgaard, he does that with his writing as well. He depicts his life as it was or as he remembers it, and he just it's not so much about the structure of the writing as it is just throwing you into his mindset. And I got a bit of a I got a sense of that. I got a hint of that with this movie, but I think Knausgaard does it a lot better. Maybe that's because literature is much more immersive than film. But to be fair, I have seen films that attempt the same thing that this does, but do so much better. If you want a movie that does a good job of bringing you into its time and the particular time and place into which it's set, that captures the essence of a time and place, particular time and place. Maybe not TV, but well, maybe not movie, but TV show. I would say Mad Men for the 1960s might not be the most realistic thing in the world, but it really does suck you in, and it makes you feel as they feel. Um, but also for movies, I would say, Boyhood is a good example of the early 2000s into the 2010s, 2010s, and then also it was on the tip of my tongue. Let me try to remember it. Oh, I hope I can. I can't, I completely forgot what the last one was. Shit, give me a second. Talk for a minute, Simone. Vamp for me.
What should I say? It should be about your movies. Maybe it's one of the Linklater films.
No. Just can you think of a movie that does what Mon Oncle Antoine does that better? Can you think of one that's a bit that kind of has this similar kind of just experiential narrative, but does so much more competently? Can you think of one? Can you think of an example? While I try to think of mine.
I don't. I haven't much. I watched much seen some a lot of movies. I think so. I don't know if I can say it's Forrest Gump. I think that's my favorite movie when I was a kid. But I don't know. I can't remember what happened in that movie. But I think it's give it a sense of engagement in the movie. And it feels like the movie talks me up. I think I've been there in the movie. I think a 7-year-old kid watching that movie. It feels like it's good. The movie. It's a good movie for me. It's my favorite one.
Forrest Gump is a very good example. Yeah, it's mid-century, mid 20th century, Vietnam War and everything. It covers a lot of the bases on that one. Yeah, that has a lot of historical context. But I would say probably better ones that do it. Jane Austen, maybe. I know that it's kind of apples and oranges at this point. We're kind of veering off the path here. Maybe A Room with a View. It's a good one. But yeah, I don't know. I was a little bored by it. I guess the Frenchness or maybe the French Canadianness of it. No offense, but I've always kind of seen the French Canadians as kind of snooty. You know, they don't really like, especially Americans. I don't think they really like them. Um, they don't even like other Canadians, and the Canadians think they're better than us too. So, well, maybe not you, Simone, but I mean, for me, it kind of that kind of rankles with me. You know, it kind of bugs me. It does kind of mess with my objectivity when it comes to these things. But yeah, I don't know. I thought the movie was a little too dour, and there were a lot of empty spaces in it. And I don't know. It could have been a little more engaging. It could have been a little more entertaining. It's kind of, I would say, it's kind of pretentious to not make it that, you know, a little bit. And you'll get people who are like, well, you know, it's supposed to be real. It's supposed to be deep. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care about your feelings as a viewer or whatever. It's like, yeah, but you know, it would stick with me more. It would actually be more effective if it were somewhat more entertaining. If it did compromise and do what a movie is supposed to do, I suppose, because there are things that a movie is supposed to do. You know, most people wouldn't have the time or patience or whatever willpower to sit through um, a 60 minutes of like a blue screen, for example. I know that was a movie. There was a movie called Blue, but you know that's just my opinion. You know, take it with a grain of salt. We're approaching the end now. I don't want to drag this out any longer than it has to be, so we'll end with a quick would you rather. Simone, answer me this: would you rather be able to fly for one day or be completely invisible for one day? Pick one, and why?
I think to be able to fly, that's much way better. I think you don't need to be invisible to be invisible at all. You can you can find solitude and think, or you can be alone, or you can ask people to leave you alone. So that's give you a sense of invisibility. And I think the sense of fly, I think it's so much different. I think everyone, every kid, every kid or every human being that has, I mean, that on their childhood dream to fly, and then it's one of the best thing that everyone wanted to do. Be able to gaze up the sky and feel the wind, and then go wherever you wanted to. We wanted to go.
I personally, this is just me, but I don't think I agree with you on that thing about that you said about invisibility. I think I think I would go for invisibility for a day. And the only reason I say that for two reasons. First reason being that I don't know, I have some hesitation about flying for a day, because what happens when you reach that 24-hour mark? You know, I feel like if I could fly, I would get carried away. I'd fly to a bunch of random parts of the world. I'd go crazy with it. I feel like I would lose track of where I am. I would be afraid of hitting birds. You know, I would be afraid of accidentally flying into an airplane turbine, and above all, I would be afraid of getting lost in some random part of the world, or maybe flying for so long that I passed that 24-hour mark, and then because you're only allowed to fly for a day according to this would you rather, this hypothetical, I would fall out of the sky and die, and I just there are too many risks that come with it, and it doesn't seem worth it to me. Just because you can fly, it doesn't mean that you're invincible or anything. So I think that opens a whole can of worms that I just don't even want to touch. So I would go with being invisible for that. That would be my first reason. Did you want to comment?
I agree with you about it. I remember the story of Daedalus and Icarus thing. So I think that would be. I think if you want to fly, you should plan where you're going to, so that you should know your limits about it.
Yeah, because I don't know, like, what happens when I fly. Like when I'm flying, I always question these things too much. But when I'm flying, do I how tired do I get? Like how far can I go before I get tired and I need to take a break? Am I going to be crossing the Atlantic and then halfway through I atrophy? I get a cramp or something and then I sink into the ocean and drown. How does it work? I don't know. So I'd rather go for being invisible, which maybe the rules of invisibility are a bit are just as complicated and whatever, but if I'm invisible for a day, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to help myself to some money. I'm going to rob a bank probably. Let's just be honest. I'm going to rob a bank or something, help myself to a shit ton of money. I'm probably going to take people's shit. I'm probably going to go into people's houses and just help myself to whatever they have. And I'm probably going to go into um, Scarlett Johansson. I'm probably going to go into Scarlett Johansson's dressing room and jerk off to her. Those are the things I do if I were invisible. And I think that's a pretty nice deal for one day. Fuck it, that's what I'd do. anything you want to add? I guess before we close.
I get your point, but I think I don't know if it's invisibility thing. There's also limits about being invisible. I mean, uh, uh, if you're going to be invisible, do you really need to get naked to be invisible at all, or something, or just like when fire, there is also some limits that we don't know.
And with that, folks, we have come to the end of episode 3 of the Imperial Tides podcast. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do consider giving a like, subscribing, telling all your friends, sharing. We'll be back with some more very soon. Hopefully, will be a daily affair. We're kind of try to do one a day. But yeah, stay tuned. More movies to come. More episodes. Thank you for watching. See you on the flip side.